Hello, dear viewers, and you're mostly welcome to this program, The International Sphere. I'm your host, Agnes Tuniga. Today in this program, our focus will be on the wildlife conservation. And I'm joined by my guest here, who is the ambassador of the United States of America, Ambassador Mark Childress, who with me is going to discuss concerning the wildlife conservation as a whole. From me, your host, Agnes Tuniga, please welcome to the show. Mr. Ambassador, you're very much welcome to this program, The International Sphere, and I'm very much privileged to have you on this program.
Thank you, Agnes.
To begin our program, first and foremost, let my first question be that, can you please explain on the bilateral ties between the two countries, that is the U.S. and Tanzania?
You know, Tanzania, it's become one of the most important partners for the United States worldwide. I mean, many people would be surprised to know that in terms of our bilateral assistance programs, Tanzania is actually the 7th largest program in the world. And part of this is because Tanzania has proven itself to be an incredibly committed partner in many spheres. So that now we have very large health programs in Tanzania. We have very large agricultural programs in Tanzania. Tanzania is a Power Africa country. So what we found is that once you succeed in an area, you tend to have more activity in that area, and in fact, we develop new bilateral relations. So for example, we also had, as you know, a very large Millennium Challenge Corporation compact in Tanzania, the largest ever, and we're now looking at the possibility of having a second compact here in Tanzania. So I think what you've seen is in a relatively short period of time, our relations have become more and more robust, and there's been, you know, what economists call, a positive feedback loop. So we're doing better and better together, and therefore we do more and more together.
Mr. Ambassador, this is just out of curiosity. You speak very well Swahili, but what is your understanding to this term, wanyamapori, as our focus will be on wildlife conservation?
What's my understanding of the term?
Yes.
Well, just that I can translate.
Yes.
Just wanyamaporini is what I usually say, but yes, it's wildlife. So. And I think, look, I think it is an important area. And I think wanyamaporini ni muhimu sana kwa Tanzania for two reasons. I think kwanza ni urithi wa asili kwa Watanzania wote. And the second reason is that utalii wa wanyamaporini ni muhimu sana kwa uchumi wa Tanzania. And I think those two areas are essential, because if you don't both understand that it is a key part of the natural heritage of this country, and therefore a birthright of not just this generation, but generations to come, but also it is essential that we, all of us, and I include myself in this, do a much better job of having Tanzanians benefit from whether it's wildlife tourism or whether it's the associated forms of tourism that are when people come to the country to see wild animals. But put in a different way, imagine a world where these unique pieces of the natural heritage weren't available to Tanzania. The economic structure of Tanzania would be fundamentally different. So I do think that this is, I have some people say to me, why do you talk about wild animals? What's the importance of that? Because maybe I don't really care about wild animals. And what I say to people is, look, I think it's fine. If you don't care about wild animals, that's fine. But if you care about the economy of Tanzania, you need to be committed on this issue.
As I recall, it's just recently, it's just last month that your government, the U.S. government, has handed over equipments to the Tanzanian government at the Salaam Game Reserve. How do you think this is going to assist in terms of the anti-poaching efforts and wildlife conservation as a whole?
I think it's a really, like, we were really excited about that. We did a great program that day, and the thing I liked about that program is that we had many different actors there. You know, I've learned one of the things I've really learned in Tanzania is that there is great wisdom in Methali. I learned all these proverbs that tell me incredibly important things, and one of them that I think is quite relevant to the situation that we find here is the idea that kidole kimoja hakifunji chawa.
Exactly.
And I think that's very, very true. And I think we all need to pull together. And at that event in the Salaam, we had the United States government, we had the German government, we had obviously the Tanzanian government represented, we had the Frankfurt Zoological Society represented, and we actually had Paul Allen, who is a United States, one of the founders of Microsoft. All those people were there that one day. And as I said that day, it was a great day, and it was an important day. But to solve this problem, we need lots and lots of days like that. And I think it's one way to think about this is what we were very focused on in the Salaam that day was sort of the very first line of defense, which is the rangers and the capacity for there to be better enforcement in the parks. And so one of the things we were doing, we were giving them equipment, and I think that's important. Also, in the next few days, we will have United States Marines that are going to the Salaam, and they will be training rangers in the Salaam and in Ruaha, and they will be coming back on a regular basis to this country. So that we need to equip these rangers better, we need to train these rangers better. And that's a key part of the problem. However, it's only the first part, because if you don't then move to other forms of enforcement, which is to say, as I said that day as well, there are lots of poachers that are in suits. And if we don't have enforcement not just of the borders of parks and of reserves, but also to go after criminals who are involved in wildlife trafficking, we're not going to be able to stop it. And then, as you move out in a further expansion, if we don't find ways for people in the communities around these areas, the wildlife management areas, to benefit from these unique sort of natural resources, then we will not succeed as well. And then the last piece, I think, and it's related to the idea of the community succeeding, is we have to have sort of a permanent structure around tourism. I mean, if you look at the northern part of Tanzania and you look at the southern part of Tanzania and you see what's happening in wildlife, there is a stark difference. In the north, and we'll see these things reflected, I think, in the surveys that are going to be happening, the numbers are going to be released soon. We have a very developed infrastructure. We have a lot of the things that we just talked about. We have much better protection in the reserves. We have more investment from wildlife management areas. We have better tourism. And in those places, the parks and the reserves are more protected. In the south, while they are still extraordinary resources, they're not as well protected. There aren't as many tourists. The wildlife management areas have not been developed as well, to be candid with you. So one of the things we have to do is we know that there are unique Tanzanian solutions to this problem. We just need to expand where that's happening, and it needs to be over the whole country.
As you have a keen interest on this matter, how is poaching a threat to Tanzania? Because I understand you also visited Salaam, and you must have been given some statistics there.
Yes.
So how can you elaborate on this?
It's very shocking, and I think, again, we'll see the numbers from the survey, in fact, that Paul Allen was helping fund, will be out soon. But I think there is no question that we are facing here in Tanzania losses, particularly with respect to the elephant population, of an unprecedented nature. I fear that we may find that the numbers themselves, and remember, these numbers can't be perfect. So there'll be a margin for error no matter how you put these numbers together. But the story, which is what's happening in the Salaam, what's happening in Rungwa, what's happening in Katavi, is a very devastating one. And you know, the reality is this is a national crisis. And this is something that I've talked with the president about, I've talked with the minister about. I think that there is a real understanding of the nature and scope of this problem. And the good news is that these problems can be solved. Unfortunately, we've faced similar crises not even just in Tanzania, but in other places in Africa. And the very simple sort of steps that I just talked about are what you have to do some form of them to solve this problem. So we don't have to go split the atom. We don't have to figure out a new sort of a solution. We kind of know the solution. We really do have to implement it, though, and we have to implement all parts of it. We can't implement, you know, the idea, I sort of joke with people, you know, you could put the 82nd Airborne Division in the Salaam, And if you don't resolve those other problems, if you don't have the people who live in the areas around benefiting, if you don't deal with prosecution, if you don't put in the infrastructure, you're not going to be able to protect these animals. Because, as I said, it's a two-part problem. In the same way that this is a unique natural heritage, it's also a key economic driver. And we've got to solve both of those at the same time. So it's not, if you want to make a factory work, it's simpler, right? You just make sure that you build the factory, you make sure the power comes to the factory, you make sure the workers are there. This is different because these are wild animals. These are wanyama waparini. So they present unique challenges to making sure that you protect the resource. But it can be done. I mean, this is, as you know, the extraordinary parks and reserves in this country are one of the many, many extraordinary legacies from Mwalimu. He was the first person in Tanzania to see the incredible opportunity that we could have from these. So I really see that this is not just an economic issue. I see it not just as an issue of protecting this unique sort of world resource, but I see it quite honestly as doing what we can to fulfill one of these great legacies from Julius Nyerere.
But what about the community that is living around within the wildlife area? Are they educated enough to understand that they are supposed to protect this wildlife or this heritage species that we have? How do you see that?
I think that's exactly, that's a very, that's an excellent question because it's exactly the point of this, right? It doesn't matter if you put on a map a bunch of places that are supposed to be protected, or you put on the map a bunch of people that are supposed to benefit in wildlife management areas, if it doesn't actually work on the ground, right? My experience is, we are very invested in this wildlife management area concept here in the mission and have been for many, many years, long before I came here. My general experience is, and I suspect this is yours as well, is that when you give people true opportunities that arise out of tourism, or in some cases, out of managed hunting and so forth, they're very quick to understand. They see the benefits. They will do everything possible to try to make sure that those benefits still keep accruing to them and to their families. But the two places where it falls down are, one, in terms of this protection element that I talked about.
Yeah.
People in wildlife management areas can't protect. Some of them do great work, right? But they can't protect in the same way that the folks in TANAPA and the Wildlife Division are assigned with this responsibility. So I think it's important for all of us to make sure that that resource is being protected. But it's also the case that we have to be creative about what sorts of benefits that they get. I mean, for example, one of the things that we've invested a lot in wildlife management areas around Ruaha. And one of the things they started doing and working with some of the non-governmental organizations like the Wildlife Conservation Society, we're doing these, these bee fences to try to keep elephants out.
Yeah.
And what they discovered was, yes, it kept some elephants out. Nothing's perfect to keep elephants out, by the way. Elephants are, after all, elephants. Right? But they also discovered that it created this incredible benefit in terms of the honey. And now there's more and more of them are producing honey. So they have the bees there. It keeps some elephants out. That's good. But they also are saying, wow, this is an incredible opportunity to produce honey and sell honey and make real resources for our families. And now that's become a huge driver. When we started, we didn't even know that was going to be sort of a driver. So one of our requirements, I think, is to be very transparent with folks in these wildlife management areas about what the kind of opportunities are, to give them resources that are protected, but also be creative with them. And the other piece of this is, and this is something I'm working on with the minister, we need to figure out a better way to make sure that the resources that are going to come to wildlife management areas come quickly and come in time that let them plan. Because one of the things that we can't have is a world in which resources sit back in some bureaucracy for a long time before they get to the wildlife management area, because that's devastating. And we're working on trying to do a better job of getting those resources out quickly.
Yeah, I understand, and you've mentioned earlier on concerning the other counterparts that you work very closely in wildlife conservation. And how do you work closely with them in terms of wildlife conservation?
Yes, I think part of this is I'm very cognizant of what are responsibilities that are unique to my Tanzanian partners and what are things that I can help with. And I think that's important because we are not going to start supplanting fundamental responsibilities that they have at the TANAP or Wildlife Division. Our job, I think, is to find those areas where we can be creative about finding ways to help that, frankly, wouldn't be able to be done as quickly or maybe even as efficiently within government. I'll give you a good example. When we went to the Salaam, one of the things we celebrated was that Paul Allen, this American Microsoft founder, actually is himself building, in association with the Frankfurt Zoological Society, a digital VHF system in the Salaam. Now, you know, it's funny. I didn't know what that meant when someone explained that to me, and so here's what it does. Right now, when rangers are trying to communicate in the Salaam, they don't have secure communications. So if you're poachers and you're clever, you may be able to listen in on what rangers are saying to each other. That's not good. Even more importantly in some ways, with this system, GPS is embedded in all the handsets. So when rangers are out in the field, you'll know exactly where the rangers are at all times, which is very helpful for rangers. It's also helpful for people in a communication base to know exactly where everybody is. Because if, for example, somebody wasn't where they were supposed to be, you would know that.
Yeah.
Very helpful,
GPS,
right?
Yes, yeah.
Now, this is something that's a significant outlay of millions of dollars. Given all the other constraints that are happening right now, you know, within the Wildlife Division, it's pretty hard to say, hey, can you find millions of dollars to do this right now? This billionaire has said, I'm very happy to do that. I'm happy to contribute. And also, by the way, he doesn't have any government bureaucracy to deal with, like me and like people in the Tanzanian government, so he can just write a check and make it happen, which he's done. So that, to me, is an idea where we found a way to be helpful to the rangers. We're not trying to supplant the fundamental nature of the activities that the Tanzanian government's doing, but we're finding ways to be a really good partner and also, quite frankly, be able to move more quickly. Because both bureaucracies in the Tanzanian and the United States government don't move as quickly as I would like, let me put it that way. And so having private sector folks who can come in and be part of this struggle, I think it's critical. And I've found a number of not just Americans, but I found a number of individuals, both in foundations and private folks, who want to be part of the struggle, who understand, by the way, that while these numbers that we're probably gonna find are devastating, that's not a reason to leave this fight. That's a reason to redouble your efforts. And we need partners like that, because we need people to understand that this is a fight we can win, but only if we engage in it with everything we have.
Yeah. Mr. Ambassador, my concern is with the national park that you've put on concentration, like the Salaam and the Ruaha National Park. Why so? Because we have some other national parks, the Ngorongoro, Tarangire, and others, to mention a few. Why so?
I think the reason is, as we talked about before, the nature of the challenge in Tanzania is very different in very different places. In Ngorongoro, by the way, has had times in its history when poaching was a huge problem.
Yeah.
That is not the case now. Tarangire is doing quite well and is addressing these sorts of problems. We're going to find that in Salaam, as you know, this has not been the case. In Ruaha, and more specifically in Rungwa that is adjacent, I think we're going to find that that's not the case. So the problem is we've got to go where the fire is hottest. And right now the fire is hottest in that area, Salaam, Ruaha, Rungwa, Katavi. And that's where we need to focus. The good news is that we don't have to go everywhere in the country all at once right now. Right? The good news is that, as we've said, in the north, the situation is stable. It doesn't mean there aren't risks in the north. There are. It doesn't mean they're not poachers. There are. But we do not have that. The quantum of the problem is much more easily managed up north. And that's why we all got to focus on the south.
Mr. Ambassador, very quickly, because we are running out of time, but most of these national parks lack well-trained personnel, especially the game wardens and game scouts. What is your government now doing to provide training in these areas?
Well, as we talked about, we actually one of the things we discovered was that in the Salaam, we were sending out these rangers on long patrols. They didn't have tents. In some cases, didn't have binoculars or spotlight. It was things like that. So we've provided those things, right? And I think that's important. The German government is providing uniform and boots. So it's very difficult if you don't have the basic sort of materiel. But we need to do better training. And as I said, as we speak, U.S. Marines are going down to the Salaam, and they're going to be training rangers not just in the Salaam but also in Ruaha. And we're going to continue that. That's a commitment that we're making over time. We're also, by the way, looking for private sector opportunities, because I think that some of the things, as with these other challenges, these things have been met and overcome in the past in other countries. And one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that some of those individuals that may have supported those efforts in other countries now come to Tanzania. So I think there's a role not just for, say, TAPA to do training, because they're going to do that, but we find additional sort of actors like the U.S. Marines. We find resources that can go to non-governmental organizations to also help with training. And at some point, you begin to really get the benefit of all of us sort of putting our shoulder to the wheel. And I think this doesn't happen immediately, but eventually we begin to have a much better trained, better motivated, highly equipped set of Rangers. And those are the ones that are going to be on the front line. And that's the future.
China has just prohibited and also banned all the ivory products. How can you comment on this?
I think it's unfortunately the solution will require a much more sustained and comprehensive effort than that. But as an indicator of the fact that China recognizes the nature of this problem, it's a good indicator. And I think we need China's help, because all the things you and I have talked about today thus far have really been on what we do to try to stop people from acquiring these items. But the only full solution is one that also deals with the demand side.
And finally, your message now, as we've just marked the World Wildlife Day.
My message is that all of us have a responsibility to make sure that these extraordinary animals and this extraordinary national asset is preserved. And the one thing I will say, I've said this in other audiences, this is a big part of my job. I feel like if I can't help Tanzania succeed in this challenge, then I have not been the sort of ambassador that I want to be. But I've also said to people that who have met my wife, that you have to understand how committed I am to this particular topic, because kila usiku, mke wangu, kila usiku, mke wangu, huni uliza, umefanya
nini?
No. Umefanya nini leo? Kuokoa maisha ya tembo.
That's a good one.
Kila usiku.
That's a good one. Mr. Ambassador, I appreciate your time talking to us.
Thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you. Well, dear viewers, we have come to the end of our program, The International Sphere. From me, your host, Agnes Tuniga, thank you very much for being with us.